Hello, everyone. My name is Anh and welcome to our presentation today. I want to start our talks by a saying of a well-known polymath, Benjamin Franklin, and it goes, "C'est quand le puits est sec que nous connaissons la valeur de l'eau," and it means that we only appreciate the water when the well is dry. The same will happen with our Earth and climate. If we leave the global climate change out in the cold and let the Earth become a dry well, we won't even have a chance to regret it. So in order to prevent this problem, the whole world needs to take action. Recently, the EU is at the forefront of international climate efforts by piloting the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and which stands for CBAM. With maximum effect, it will influence trading partner countries to take steps in the same direction. And that is the reason why the four sophomore students from Vietnam are presenting here to discuss more about the topic, the impact of CBAM on Vietnam's trade and progress toward the net zero target. Our presentation will be divided into 5 parts, as you can see on the screen. We believe that CBAM will put developing countries such as Vietnam into a new context of both opportunities and challenges.
Hey, good morning, I'm Quynh. And before we accept the impact of CBAM on Vietnam trade and progress toward the net zero targets, we have to know more clearly what CBAM is. CBAM is proposed by the EU to put a price on imported products that are carbon intensive.
Sorry, we cannot hear you
to
anymore.
Carbon pricing system.
I have no idea why.
And in particular, CBAM certificates, which are priced based on weekly ETA allowance. Importers report the total verified greenhouse gas emission in a given calendar year. And if the carbon price is made in their countries, the
one second, can I have the control of the mouse?
And it means that EU importer will register for the total volume goods and the relevant greenhouse gas emission. And then
okay. So
and then submit the corresponding carbon certificate if the quota is exceeded. Otherwise, additional
I'm sorry,
most of the revenue will go to the EU buckets. And in this context, we conclude that CBAM is formed on the principles of the EU ETS and to replace the free ETA allowance that are currently granted to the EU producer. And moreover, understanding the feasibility of CBAM under the view of World Trade Regime is essential to assess whether CBAM is likely to hinder Vietnam implementation of international responsibility. And here, we point out the consistency of CBAM with international treaties that Vietnam is a member of. Firstly, the EVFTA. We conclude that the EU has the right to establish CBAM as long as it's either appropriate and that Vietnam should not mitigate the application or waive the CBAM regulation. And however, the provision of CBAM must not cause arbitrary and unreasonable discrimination between Vietnam and EU under the Article 30.3. And secondly, the GATT 1994. CBAM may violate the MSN principle of WTO if the EU failed to demonstrate that it was a necessary measure. And moreover, as a developing countries, Vietnam should enjoy certain privileges in the CBAM regulation under the Article 18 and tell us about the UNFCCC. According to the Article 3, CBAM could be seen as a violation of the CBDR principles, as the responsibility for this high carbon export remains the same as that of countries with stronger economies. And we have stated the consistency of CBAM proposal up to the April 2023 with some international treaties. However, in the future, the EU may have some additional amendments, so it may change a little. Now we will pay some statement on impact of CBAM on Vietnam trade and net zero targets.
Okay, hi, my name is Minh Trang, and now we're turning to one of the most significant part of our presentation today, the impacts of CBAM on Vietnam's trade. So firstly, we have to say that CBAM has some notable risks for Vietnam in general. The indirect impacts that we have to mention include the risks of greenwashing, manipulating, carbon accounting, and global trade conflict. In other words, greenwashing and manipulating carbon accounting is a possible way that a company may use to make them look less carbon, therefore not only reduce the impact of CBAM, but also gain the support of eco-friendly consumers. About the risks of a global trade conflict, the EU may face stiff resistance from important trading partners such as China, the US, Russia, and Japan, because they regard CBAM as a protectionism, using emission reduction targets as a excuse to impose a fee on non-EU imports. From Vietnam perspective, we see that CBAM can cause lots of trade competitiveness in EU market. In 2021, the World Bank Group calculated the loss of trade competitiveness of EU partners when CBAM was implemented for the case of Thailand, India, and Vietnam. They built a model with a basic step, as you can see on slide now. Following their calculation, the three main carbon-intensive goods of Vietnam exported to EU are steel, aluminum, and cement, and some other important main reasons, as you can see on slide now. However, we find a limitation in this calculation model of the World Bank Group. In supporting this report, the group used the Bloomberg forecast EUA carbon price of around €41 for 1 ton of CO2. However, we have observed that EU carbon price from December 2022 to March of 2023 fluctuated between 80 and €100 for 1 ton CO2, which is about 2.5 times higher than forecasted carbon price of the World Bank Group. So based on the same metric method, we recalculated the ratio of CBAM payment cost for ton product with the new carbon price of around €90 for 1 ton CO2. As a result, the loss of competitiveness is higher. You can see the difference based on the information on the slide we have compiled. Besides, is concerned that when CBAM is fully implemented, indirect emission for the three products will also be tracked. If so, the loss of competitiveness may be even higher. It's due to the production of steel, aluminum, and cement in Vietnam using a lot of energies that is not green. In conclusion, we see that Vietnam's trade will suffer loss of competitiveness if CBAM is implemented. So now we turn into another part, another very interesting part presented by my teammate, Anh Thu.
Yeah, so I would like to talk about the statement of the impact of CBAM on Vietnam net zero targets. And it can be seen that CBAM actually encourages Vietnam's process of fulfilling its environmental commitment, in which it acts as an impetus for Vietnam to develop green transition, forest carbon credit market, and carbon capture and storage technology. First, about the Vietnam's green transition, which lacks the development and adoption of sustainable technologies and funds for future research. With financial burden created for exported products, CBAM forces Vietnam to seek international cooperation on green technology and investment attraction. CBAM promotes green transition, therefore it cuts down on carbon emission in Vietnam. And second, CBAM fosters Vietnam's current forest carbon credit market by affecting the need for expand on green transition and internal decarbonization of the country. In other words, this market allows landowners to sell the carbon taken up by their forests to other countries to compensate for emissions made elsewhere. And this also provides an additional sources of revenue to the government, which can be invested in the country's decarbonization process and green transition. And the last aspect I want to talk about is the facilitation that CBAM brings to the CCS technology, a way of reducing emissions emitted to the atmosphere from coal-fired power plants or gas. However, not many Vietnamese businesses pay attention to this model. When CBAM sets a requirement to cut down on CO2 emitted from production, more firms and enterprises will focus on applying this this technology. Hence, Vietnam is expected to not only pay lower tariff when exporting goods to the EU, but also quickly and directly cut down on CO2 emissions in the country. So to sum up, the establishment of CBAM opens many opportunities for Vietnam's net zero targets, while at the same time poses challenges for Vietnam's trade. In the next part of our presentation, some recommendations will be made. Please welcome our next and last presenter, Thao.
Okay, thank you, Angry. Hello, my name is Thao, and today I'm going to talk about lessons for other countries and recommendations for Vietnam to Tibet is applied. To begin with, we want the national lessons that Vietnam can learn from ETS system. Vietnam can establish an ETS system that helps Vietnam reduce the CBAM payment for exported products. However, we realize that EU ETS remains some weaknesses such as a lot of control, trading emissions, permits, and legal regulations, so the government needs to avoid its drawbacks. Another lesson can be learned from Canada and California when designing pricing system for individual countries. We can start with Canada. They carry out separating fuel fees and active fees of major industries. The proceeds will be invested in offsetting emissions system. Moreover, Canada used the principle of a clear cap and trade model and considers that this price must be designed to completely replace existing federal fuel charge. Similarly, in the case of California, they find that the problem comes from the resource disturbance. Therefore, California has taken into consideration the risk of resource disturbance and tried to ensure an interest balance for all stakeholders. Based on those lessons, I will give some recommendations for Vietnam and need to adapt to CBAM. First, the best way to reach economic and environmental efficiency is to establish a reasonable environmental protection task area to reflect the carbon tax calculatedly. In order to prevent the overlap of the new task and the existing tasks, we suggest that the government should accept and supplement these tasks in accordance with other relevant domestic and international regulations. Secondly, we propose that Vietnam should continue to promote the development of the domestic market toward regional and world integration. Moreover, Vietnam should utilize available domestic and international resources such as scientific and technological adoption and international experience and technical application, and so on. Finally, the last recommendation is for Vietnamese enterprise in attracting investment capital. Foreign direct investment is the most potential investment that Vietnam can utilize. And seizing this opportunity, Vietnamese business can attract high-quality investment projects by implementing advertising, investment promotion, and ensuring transparencies in accounting and business intermediation.
Okay, to sum up, here are key takeaways from today's presentation, and you guys can see on the screen now. By the way, now in Vietnam, we are about to see the dawn and welcoming new day coming. We honestly believe that with the efforts of all parties to cooperate and constantly look for new solutions like CBAM, we can hope for a future for the environment in Vietnam and the world, which will be as bright as the glow of the dawn. That's also the reason we are in the conference now. That concludes our presentation for today. We are very sorry for some technical mistakes, and thanks a lot for your attention.